I'm Pavia Rosati, and you're listening to Sweet Success.
You've just checked in to Sweet Success. Join me, Katie Cline, for exclusive conversations with hotel executives, hospitality leaders, and industry innovators. Together, we'll uncover the strategies and techniques these masters of hospitality relentlessly refine. Whether you're already in the industry or just starting out, tune in every week to unlock the secret to your sweet success. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sweet Success. I'm your host, Katie Cline, and today I am delighted to welcome the wonderful Pavia Rosati to the show. Pavia is a travel and lifestyle expert, as well as the CEO and founder of Fathom, the award-winning, independently owned editorial travel platform. Fathom offers a website, subscription newsletter, concierge travel planning service, and an international book series, all with the aim of connecting sophisticated travelers with expert intelligence. Pavia and I first met on a press trip to Bhutan. If you listen to episode 5 with the fine art photographer Gray Malin, you may have heard a little story about the fabulous Pavia there. And if you haven't listened yet, bookmark it for after this one. She's a tireless explorer who has lived in Italy, Paris, London, Washington, D.C., and New York City. Pavia, thank you so much for being here today.
Katie, I'm always happy to spend any time with you, anywhere in the world.
Likewise. So tell us from your perspective, how did you first get started in hospitality?
I have somehow been in hospitality my entire media career. If you consider that the bulk of my career, everything I've ever done and focused on has been about how people should spend their free time. Whether I was the assistant to the arts editor at Mirabella magazine, shout out to anybody with a long memory, my first job, wherein, I was helping decide who are the musicians who you should pay attention to, what are the movies that you should see. I did that at AOL for a long time when I ran the entertainment channel. I had a very happy decade at Daily Candy where all we did was help people live and experience their cities. And so, yes, the work is media, but the focus of media was always how people should use the precious leisure time that they have, which is kind of what hospitality is all about, giving you a good experience when you leave home.
And speaking of names like AOL, Daily Candy, you just must have seen the media landscape change and evolve so much throughout your career. So paint us a little picture of what was it like when you first started?
Well, there were expense accounts. There were expense accounts. There were friends with expense accounts. There were more media parties. There was just a lot more money in media. I mean, I started working in magazines. It was the golden era of, what Tina Brown was doing at Vanity Fair or Anna Wintour, right? I mean, the comings and goings of lunch at the Royalton was actually news. So it was flush. It was very flush, and media felt really important. Editors were personalities. And listen, in the small world of New York City with small people, let's not say they were, Tom Hanks at the time, but media felt like it mattered and it moved things in a way that feels, different people are moving things now. Mm-hmm. And I definitely saw that transition into digital. I mean, I've been in digital since the mid-90s, which I joke makes me a dinosaur. But I stayed at a lot of companies, right? So I was at AOL for 4 years. I was at Daily Candy for almost 10 years. We're somehow looking at year 15 at Fathom. So despite the fact that I've been in digital media, which is this incredibly fast-paced, super changing space, I've been pretty consistent with the jobs. I haven't worked at that many places.
Mm-hmm. And even speaking of digital media, and obviously, like you talked about with just the funds that were in the space at the time, I also imagine because I'm thinking about when I started in PR and we were loaning out garments for a fashion designer I was working for, and we were creating carbon copy paper record trails of that. Oh. So I also imagine digital in the 90s meant something different. Did you even have 24/7 email access? Did we have cell phones attached to us at the time? how has that shifted too? Like what digital even means?
It's right. So, I mean, I got my first email address when I was working at the Village Voice. I mean, and then I got a job working for News Corp's web startup because somehow the fact that I had an email address made me qualified to work in digital media. I mean, but that was really fun. Everybody was everybody was making it up as we went along. And that was definitely exciting. And so one of the things I didn't say earlier, the transition from magazines and print, which was an environment that was really flush, digital was super scrappy. I mean, if you could do so much when you had Rupert Murdoch and Cy Newhouse paying for the bills that you never saw, in digital media, it was suddenly like, what can we do for $200, right? And that was exciting and that was fun. I mean, the barriers to entry were a lot lower. Anybody could put up their blog on the early platforms that then changed and evolved. But going from sort of flush to scrappy was definitely a transition that I saw in media.
What would you say are some of the advances that you've seen since the 90s till now in media specifically that you're most excited about, or that you're like, this is what the industry needed all along?
Well, the democratization of information was certainly a very good thing. There were fewer, gatekeepers. There were fewer, what we say is the answer. And that's been very good because it's meant there are more voices and more people have access to share their stuff. I mean, I think a lot of it is dumb, but God love the people who just dance in front of a camera because that's what they want to do, right? I mean, people have always been dancing in their underpants in front of a camera. The people have always been dancing, in their underpants in front of a mirror. Now they're just doing it in front of a camera. God bless.
Okay, so I was going to ask you, what are the advances that maybe we could do without? I'm wondering if the dances are maybe something that fall into that camp.
It's not the dances, and I'm going to sound like Sister Mary Pavia, but we're just a little too obsessed with the selfies. And I mean, I get it, right? Everybody wants to be the star of their own movie. The downside is being the star of your own movie. It just risks making you a little bit selfish. And that is one of the things that I just wish we were a little bit more tempered. And also, I am an editor. And so when I see bad content, all I think is, delete, delete, delete. Yeah. So I don't like to see garbage. And, the good, it's kind of the good and the bad it's the same thing, right? Everybody has access. Therefore, everybody has a voice. And then the editor in me says, well, should everybody have a voice? I think some people are worth listening to more than others. Right. But again, let me be kind and not so strict about this. Who I want to listen to may not be who you want to listen to, may not be who my goddaughters want to listen to. And so terrific that everybody can sort of find their people.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you though. I mean, as a complete side tangent, I feel the exact same way in the sense of just the self-obsession. Like, let's just take our head out of our phone and maybe, ask our friends and family what's going on with them, as opposed to worrying about how we capture ourselves. But like you said, it is giving everyone a voice if they want. And maybe we don't appreciate what they have to say or agree with, but that's the point, is other people might.
So I often think that, 20 years from now, when they want to show this era in a movie, it's just going to be everybody walking down the street like this, like a bunch of robots, right? That's how we're going to know. And like, oh, it's the early 2000s. I mean, we'll probably be doing this instead. It's not as though we're not going to have the information, but it's just, we're going to be dated by the fact that we have chronic neck problems, probably.
Yeah. And for anyone who's listening and not watching right now, you can probably guess what Pavia is doing, but she is looking down as if she's on a phone and
walking down the street, bumping into people because I haven't been paying attention to what I'm looking at. Yeah.
and unfortunately, like, it's mocked, but then if you actually look up in the real world, it's like that. Like, I was at a doctor's office the other day and I looked around and every single person was looking down and on their phone. And there was a bit of an itch in me to do the same, but almost out of like spite, I was like, I'm going to be the one person who just sits here.
Who just sits here and reads a book. I mean, The saddest iteration of that is when friends are at the dinner table and four friends, everybody's on their phone instead of talking to each other, right?
I
That
agree.
I think is the worst. It makes us, and again, it's not just to carry on that theme of selfishness. It also, it makes us less sociable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Listen, I like, I like talking and I like talking to people, and it gets back to the idea of hospitality and sharing. It's a pretty inhospitable thing to be buried in your phone and and not paying attention to the people who are around you.
Could not agree more. Let's put that on a
Yeah.
bumper sticker. But talking about hospitality and going on the complete opposite side, let's talk about Fathom because it's fantastic. In
Oh, thank you.
2011, you and Geraldine Gerba co-founded Fathom together. What made you guys come up with the idea in the first place?
I mean, pig-headed case of if you want something done right, do it yourself. I don't know. I mean, at the time, we both worked at Daily Candy. And I took a job at Daily Candy thinking I'll do this for 3 months. And I tried to quit the first time after 5 years and then finally left just shy of 10 years. Geraldine was a genius. I mean, she's smart, she's dynamic, and she was an unbelievable colleague. And when I started thinking about a travel website, she was the first person who I worked with who I told, and we started conceiving of Fathom together. And the nice thing about working with her is, if we do consulting work. We have a big project that we do with JetBlue. And when I went back to look at something that we had done, I said, did you write that or did I write that? And she said, I have no idea. And there's so much about Fathom that I think, did I come up with that or did Geraldine come up with that? And so there's a real mind meld to the way that we worked. That is, I feel just incredibly grateful to have found somebody who I can work with so closely. We're very different, but we really complement each other in a nice way. To get back to what you actually asked me, at the time and so 2009 was when I started to fill notebooks. The internet was full of, here's how you get the cheapest plane ticket. Here's how you get the cheapest hotel room. There were a lot of, here's a personal blog, but there wasn't really anything that kind of mixed the efficiency and the efficacy and the speed of the internet with the reliability of journalism. At the time, the reliable journalistic outlets like the New York Times Travel Magazine and Travel and Leisure and Condé Nast Traveler, and I know I sound like these are very old-fashioned brands, but they're still really excellent. Their websites were pretty much just putting articles online. They weren't easily searchable. They were not dynamic websites. So the brief for Fathom was, how can we create something that has the efficiency of the web with the reliability of journalism, but deliver it in a way that's, fast and efficient, and that feels like you're getting travel advice from a friend? We always wanted Fathom to really feel like it's your friends, maybe friends you haven't met yet, sharing the experience that they had. So we were less focused on, here's 3,000 words on the definitive state of Berlin today, and more, I just spent the weekend in Berlin. I stayed in this cool boutique hotel in Kreuzberg. I ate at this restaurant that only serves fried chicken. I found these cool galleries. Look at the sun, look at the glasses that I bought at this shop, right? And so that immediate tone and that welcoming style was what we were looking for and that we didn't really see out there. And so we just created it.
Calling all short-term rental hosts and real estate investors ready to turn your listing into a money-making machine? Join me at the 3rd annual Level Up Your Listing Summit, happening March 9th through 11th in Phoenix, Arizona. It's the event where female hosts come together to learn, share, and level up their game. Use code SweetSuccess, that's SUITESUCCESS, to get 10% off your ticket at levelupyourlistingsummit.com. Tickets are sure to sell out, so act fast. Hope to see you there. And if we go back to what you said about the mind meld with Geraldine, is that something that just naturally developed over time? Is that something that comes from true friendship? Is that really what you saw in her as your colleague at Daily Candy from the beginning, but you didn't realize it until you guys were executing together? And how can people who are thinking about someone as a partner or thinking about taking on a partner know what to look for to find the right person to work with?
I mean, how do you find someone to marry? How do you find a partner? How do you find a best friend, right? I mean, it's not as though it's I don't know the answer to that. You click with someone, right? You kind of you click, you work well together. I mean, Daily Candy was an incredible place. I mean, we're still very close colleagues. We're still very good friends. I don't know. Geraldine is magical, I guess.
When you know, you know.
Well, kind of. And it's the sort of thing you can't force, right? If you have a checklist, I mean, one of the things we didn't have with Fathom, we never launched somebody who was obsessed with making money as we were obsessed with content, right? Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how many business blind dates I went on, how many people I was introduced to who were like, oh, she'd be a great business partner for you. And I would go on these dates, I would go on these coffee dates and be like, nope, I sure am kissing a lot of frogs, right? And it was more, and I really felt like being fixed up to get married, and you can be fixed up all you want, but doesn't mean it's going to really, even if you're great for each other on paper, and if your experience seems to match, then that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to work well together. And I found that with so many colleagues over the years, you can't really predict who's going to be the colleague that you perfectly click with until you start working together. And then you realize, hey, we make magic. Like, we're good in an editorial meeting. We really like each other's company. We can challenge each other. We can disagree in productive ways. So I'm really grateful that I have that with Geraldine.
How did you guys choose the name Fathom?
It is so hard to name things. So when we were trying to come up with what to call this company, we were playing with the idea of a compass. That's what we began with. And in fact, the O in Fathom is shaped and designed to look like a compass. So why a compass? Because a compass doesn't lie to you. And a compass always tells you where to go. And a compass always gives you reliable direction. And we wanted, at a time when the internet was still maybe, who are these people and why should I trust them? We wanted to stand up and say, you can rely on us, because we take our information really seriously and we want to be a truthful place. So we began with the idea of compass that led to like ideas of units of navigation that led somehow to the water, because water's such a nice image. Anyway, I cannot tell you, I still have the piece of paper. I wrote it on the table of contents of a New Yorker that I was reading, like Jetwind, Tailstream, Compass Rose, just all these words about travel and direction. And then my husband came up with Fathom. And we were like, hang on a second. And it works because Fathom has this really nice double meaning, right? It is literally the measure of a man's outstretched arms, right? It was, you can't see me, but I have my arms out, and it is a fixed measure. We talk about 5 fathoms of depth. And then the second meaning, to play on depth, you say, can you fathom that? Like, to fathom something means to understand it. And so we really like the idea of, yes, it is measurable and fixed and you can trust it, but it also has this second sense of understanding, which is, if we're doing our best, we can kind of bring a sense of understanding to the stories that we're telling about the world. And then the tagline that we have, way to go, which has always kind of been the tagline and is now the name of the newsletter that we do on Substack, way to go also has a double meaning, right? Like, this is the way to go to the boat ferry dock to get to the island. But then it's also like, way to go. You had a great island vacation. Good for you.
I love those. It is a great name. And I love the kind of overtness, but also secretiveness of it. Like, the double meanings, I think, are super powerful. So what were the first steps that you guys took to bring this to life? You're leaving Daily Candy together, or did you? Were you working on it while you were still there? And like,
no,
I was going to say, I think like the internet now is so much more democratized in the sense that it's easier to build websites or start blogs or do these things now than it was then. You had to work a bit harder to actually do it. But I guess coming from your backgrounds in digital media, that might have not been as overwhelming.
We definitely didn't leave together. We left. I mean, it took us a long time to leave. I know at a certain point I was like, if we're really going to do this, we got to quit our jobs, right? There was only so many times we could wake up at 7 a.m. and have meetings with an old colleague of mine, Scott Stein from AOL, who would like sketch out our old wireframes and we really spent a lot of time thinking about the foundation of the house, right? We were like, if we build a solid foundation for the house, then we can decorate it however we want to. And I do have to say that is one thing that we did really well. We thought very carefully about how should the site be structured and how should the site be set up. And now I've clearly revealed that I'm a Virgo and I need things to be I need there to be a fundamental order underneath what I'm doing in order to be creative. So we just started kind of thinking about what's the website that we would want, right? Because if it was very personal, chances are it would have a broad appeal. And so we really set out to build the travel website that we wanted. And we thought, okay, how would we navigate something? So that meant, for instance, you're traveling either, and I'm not inventing anything here, right? It's pretty logical. A lot of other websites have since been set up in the same way. You kind of travel because you kind of go to a travel website or you make a travel decision. It's either, I know where I'm going. I want to go to Anguilla for a week. And this is where I want to stay. I want to make it happen. Or it's, I know that I want to go to Anguilla. What are the best hotels? Where should I stay? That's one way where you kind of have a strong sense of what you're doing. The other use case is going to a travel website is, I don't know, I have a week off. The sunshine might be nice. Where should I go? I kind of like the beach. Yeah, the beach. Yeah, I really like the beach, right? So are you traveling because you know your destination, or do you need inspiration? And so the two main sections of Fathom that we created were the destination guides, and that's, you can search by continent, country, city, or you search by passion point. And we came up with this idea of, I travel for the ... I travel for the family, I travel for the food, I travel for the wellness, I travel for the shopping. And so an article about a chef's tour of Burgundy that tells you the great vineyards that he went to could be, I travel for the food. I travel, for the food. Or it could be, I'm going to France and Burgundy. Here's what this one person did. So we just tried to be a little bit logical about this very, what can be an ephemeral search process.
Speaking of destinations, I imagine founding Fathom has brought you to some pretty incredible places all around the world. What has been the top experience you've had or place you visited? And no, you don't have to say Bhutan because we went together, but I'm sure it's up there.
Bhutan is up there. Bhutan is, I wept on the ride from the hotel to the airport. I wept the whole time because I was so moved and so sad to be leaving such a magical place. I was really moved by Salta, Argentina. I went on a trip with friends before starting Fathom, and we just kind of rented a car from a guy. Like literally, we just got a Jeep from a guy, and we went on this road trip through this magical countryside. So that was really great. That was a road trip with a gang of friends. Sri Lanka was a pretty unforgettable trip also. I went to Antarctica with Silversea last year, and though I am pretty staunchly anti-cruise, you can't go to Antarctica unless you're on a ship, and that was an incredibly moving experience. We saw in Antarctica what Shackleton saw to a large extent. I mean, it's just, there's nothing there except a lot of penguins and birds. And it was really kind of special to be in a place like that, right? I mean, think about the conveniences, the things we're used to, the subways, the Starbucks, all that. Nothing. There are no bathrooms. There's nothing but rocks, snow, and stinky, squawking penguins who are the most adorable things you've ever seen. So Antarctica, I was invited on that trip. It was nowhere. It had never been a place I had thought about going, but the opportunity came up and I was like, all right, sure. And that was really super moving. And for similarly unexpected reasons, taking a river cruise, I know I said I'm anti-cruise and I'm talking about two boat things, but on the Peruvian Amazon was unbelievably moving in unexpected ways.
Antarctica is the number one place that I want to visit. It's the highest on my bucket list. It would be my 7th continent. So you're selling me even more. But what I find interesting about what you just said is I'm not necessarily seeing an obvious through line in those destinations. Like you were with completely different groups. Some were press trips, some were with friends. So it's not about who you're with. maybe it's a bit that they're very different from where you live, or just kind of harder to access places. But what would you say? Like the ones that came to mind, like what is that red thread that ties them all together? Or is there one? Were they just fantastic trips?
I think they were just fantastic trips. They're all pretty nature-based trips, and I'm a city girl, right? So, I mean, one of the things I didn't talk about, and I'm almost being kind of discounting how much I love to go to Rome, what a great time I have in cities, right? So, I love Marrakesh, right? So, I'm lucky. I've been to lots and lots of places. I guess I was moved in unexpected ways. I think that's what I really took away from that. I don't like this notion of a trip is life-changing, a hotel is life-changing. I feel like I like how I am. I'm fine. I don't need anything to be life-changed. But a place that makes me think differently about how I think, that is what I found really moving about the places that I went to.
Life enhancing versus changing.
Mind-opening.
Mind-opening.
Mind-opening. I think that's what I would have said about a lot of these places. And you know what? Sometimes it's just, holy shit, these places are magical. That's it. Like Bhutan is magical. It's so wonderful and beautiful and sweet and charming. Sri Lanka, the same thing. It's like, oh my God, look at this place. Look at where we are. Yeah. I was just in Kenya for the very first time and had a similar experience. Like, this place is real. How lucky we are that we get to see this and experience this. And yeah, magic, I think, would be the through line. Just feeling of, just these places feel magical in some way that they feel magical. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I would imagine when you guys were starting Fathom, there were, lots of big dreams or kind of things in the back of your head that thought, oh, if this goes really well, this could happen or that could happen. Has there been anything unexpected that's come out? Like, it never in a million years would you have expected X?
I don't think I would have. I didn't expect to be doing it for this long. I thought it would have been build something after a couple of years, move on from it. It's been a really nice way to work through the world. Katie, everything has been surprising about starting a business. Everything has, it's not, I never refer to myself as an entrepreneur, and I kind of bristle if anybody uses that label on me because I'm not. I definitely am happy to have built something, and I like building things.
Why do you bristle at the term entrepreneur being labeled to you?
Because it kind of, either fairly or unfairly, it feels very much like a lone wolf, cowboy way of going through life and business. And I'm much more collaborative. I like to be on a team. I mean, Fathom is wonderful, but I definitely miss being on a really big team. And I think I'm just more collaborative than what the idea of entrepreneur, at least as we've defined it in recent years. I'm much more collaborative than go it on your own.
And speaking of collaborative, in 2019, you and Geraldine published a gorgeous book, Travel Anywhere and Avoid Being a Tourist.
Yeah.
In 2021, you followed that up with Travel North America and Avoid Being a Tourist. And the reason I'm bringing this up now is because writing can be a very solo, individual pursuit. And something I've found is I miss that collaboration. So did you and Geraldine get to write it together? How did those two books come about, and what was that process like for you guys?
So we had always wanted to do a book from the beginning of Fathom. We had a couple of Daily Candy books, and we always thought, wouldn't it be great to do a book at Fathom? And the book proposal, what's the book? And we floated around a couple of different things. And then Hardy Grant sent an email to us over the transom, said, hey, would you ever be interested in writing a book? And we were like, yes, we would.
Yes, please.
And so that made the process really easy. We didn't have to go out and get an agent. We didn't have to pitch the book. We didn't have to, we were very collaborative with them about what the book should be. At the time, we had a bigger team at Fathom. We had Barrett Bogger and Daniel Schwartz were editors working at Fathom. So the four of us worked on the book and collaborated on that book, and that was super fun. And then when Hardy Grant said, let's do a follow-up book, it was Geraldine and I were, along with another editor who was working at Fathom at the time, California Cheney, we started working on that book. And that was really a pandemic project, right? And so it was kind of funny to be writing a book when nobody was going anywhere. One of the things I'm proud of is we only used the word pandemic, I think, once in that whole book, right? We wanted this book to feel timeless. We knew that travel at some point would be coming back. It was solitary. It was collaborative. I mean, you work with editors, you get feedback on things, you come up with ideas, you kind of toss them out. Yeah. And Fathom also, I mean, the book also reflected some of the better things that we had published on the website, right? So if there was so the book is a mixture, we took some things that were on the web and we wrote, the bulk of it we created for the book, but we had all this great content that we had published on Fathom. And so some of that made it into the book also.
What was the best part of the book creation experience?
Holding the finished product.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a beautiful, they're both really beautiful books. It was just, you work in digital, everything is so ephemeral. I mean, the 4 years of work that I did at AOL, I used to print out my screenshots every day. So I have like 3 binders that reflect years of work at AOL. Daily Candy, the archive is just gone. It's just all gone. I keep telling myself that one day when I have a week, I'm going to go to the Wayback Machine and publish and print out some of the articles that I did, but it's nowhere. And so it's actually, I've been in digital for decades at this point. There's something really nice about having a physical product.
It's so interesting because you started your career where print was king and you guys were really leading this digital revolution. And now here you are, queens of digital, and you've now created a print book. So it's just a beautiful kind of full circle moment. What was the worst part of the book creation experience? I
am very, 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 very bad with deadlines. I am very, very bad with deadlines. And so, you have a book and it's due in 10 months and you're like, whatever, right? Like I'm definitely that person who would start the term paper the night before it was due. So I can be a very frustrating person to work with.
What do you think the secret to great content in general is?
So, anybody who's ever worked with me has heard me say this a million times. The microscopic is universal. And what does that mean? It means that and we sort of touched on this when I was talking about how we came up with Fathom. We wanted to make it very personal. The microscopic is universal. What I mean by that is the more personal you are in telling a story and even setting up the framework of a story, it may seem paradoxical, but the more universal the appeal. And, I think about this in hospitality too. If you try to create something for everybody, you've created nothing for anybody. If you get incredibly focused on your point of view, on what you want to say, on how you say it, by having such a strong point of view, you will have broader appeal. So I think that's my big rule for content, like get really personal. And you know what? This is what we see in the people on social media who are super successful and very appealing and draw the biggest audiences. They're very, very personalized in what they say and how they say it. And they end up having a very broad appeal.
Would you say this is kind of that concept of like niching down?
Yes. I don't talk about it as niche. I wouldn't say we're a niche travel publication, although I do use the word boutique to describe us a lot. And so, these are just different synonyms for the same concept, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I hear from you is words matter. You don't like entrepreneur, you don't like niche, but you have certain words that matter because you understand the power of words. And therefore you want to be really specific and intentional in the way you're being described or your company is being described.
There's a whole list of banned words. When a hotel boasts something, oh no, I don't like boasts.
No.
Yeah, language matters. Language matters. I don't like the word luxury very much. We really try to use that as sparingly as possible. I don't want to say never, because sometimes you're like, it's a luxury hotel. It just is. But luxury is a word that can mean so many different things to so many people. I mean, luxury for me is not having to look at my phone. It has less to do with the thread count of the sheets. So yeah, definitely words matter. But you know that too, because you're very careful with language and you're very careful in the way that you write and you're careful with the words that you use also. And it shows because you express yourself beautifully. I love talking to you. I love how you think about things. I like how you talk about things. I like how you write about things. I think there's a reason we're friends, isn't there?
I was going to say, that's very kind. And no, listeners, I did not make her say that, I promise. Another thing we have in common is you currently split your time between New York and London. I guess I can't really say I currently do that anymore. But tell us a little bit about that and maybe which city you see as the superior one.
Well, I love all my children. I am married to an Englishman. And after having spent the bulk of the first 10 years of our marriage based in New York City, he's like, I'm ready for some time at home. So we started spending a lot more time in London at the end of 2020. And now I pretty much split my time without too much planning. So I kind of have vague ideas of where I am. Like we like to be in New York over the holidays because he likes Christmas in New York City. And we tend to be based in Europe in the fall because it's a nice time to travel around Europe. So it's back and forth. And the differences between the cities. I've come to realize now that I really spend so much time there that I have to understand things like how the heating works in my house and why there's two different types of electricity systems, like 3 little plugs or 3 big plugs. I've come to realize that London and New York are not really comparable cities. The better comparable cities are London and LA. Because, and tell me if you think this also, having lived in both places, New York is really compact. I live in Manhattan, but I'm not one of these people who doesn't go to Brooklyn and who doesn't go to Queens. I bounce around the city. But New York is so compact and efficient that you're pretty much 20 to 25 minutes from wherever you want to be, right? And that means you can bounce around a lot in New York City. You can do a bunch of different things in a night. London, 45 minutes is the opening gambit from anywhere that you want to be, right? Which really impacts what you can end up doing, right? I mean, if we're in North London, we live in Highgate. A lot of my friends are in Acton. It's more than an hour to get to their house for dinner. I'm not going to be bouncing around to too many places on the way, right? So, it happens to me not infrequently that despite the fact I've lived in New York City for decades, I can sometimes find myself at 2 a.m. on a random Tuesday and look around and be like, how the hell did I get here? This is great, right? New York has that ability to just surprise you. London, maybe I'm just a middle-aged married lady in London, but I'm a middle-aged married lady in New York City also, but London doesn't really surprise me in quite the same way. And I do think it's really because the city is so big, the city is so broad, it's just harder to be spontaneous in London than it is in New York City. And I love not knowing what's coming next, right? I have no idea where I'm going next year. I have no idea what my plans are. I'm going to go to a bunch of places, but I have no idea what those places are. And that makes me really, really, really happy.
It's really funny because I would have given that exact same speech, but the opposite way. And the caveat here is I still, even after living there for 6 years, have full rose-colored glasses for London. And I have very critical eyes on New York. And I feel like their transportation is so much more efficient, so much better, so much faster, reliable. My husband and I joke here back in New York, like if you miss your subway, like you're probably going to wait 10, 15 minutes for the next one. And maybe this is because our base is in Astoria. So getting around is a bit more complicated. Like the fact that really Brooklyn and Queens aren't connected by a mass transit is just crazy to me. So maybe that's part of it, is maybe I'm starting from a more central location in London and starting from a less central location in New York. But it's just I always find it so interesting how people can experience the same places and have completely different outputs in what they felt.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
you're
you
such
have
a
a
New Yorker. It makes sense to me that you would love it here.
kind of am. Yeah,
You
I
are.
kind of am. But but listen, I also really love it being in London. I'm obsessed with my nephews in London. I love my girlfriends in London. Um, I like how easy it is to get around from London.
Yeah. And speaking of too, something you've done for a while now that I've always envied is for the last 3 weeks in the fall, you spend some time in the Amalfi Coast with friends. So obviously easier to get there from London than it is from New York. But tell us a bit how that tradition began and what you do while you're there.
I eat an awful lot of spaghetti, and I'm not even
Yeah.
kidding. So the place that we go for a few weeks the time frame is end of September into October, is a restaurant called Lo Scoglio. They have rooms upstairs. And so we go, there's a group of friends who usually come with us every single year. My brother-in-law, our friend Rhett, different people come, and it's just this place where I just go and I pretty much shut down. I mean, I joke that I don't know what it's like to travel without a notebook. And this is one of the only times where I don't have a notebook out very much. And it's this restaurant that's perched over the water. The food is amazing. I'm really, really, really close to the family. So I grew up spending summers in Italy. And so going to Italy on a regular basis is kind of a cadence I've had my whole life. But now instead of going up to the Veneto area where my family is, I go to the Amalfi Coast. My family sometimes gives me a hard time, but I'm like, have you seen the Amalfi Coast, folks? It's a lot nicer than the cornfields outside Venice. How did the tradition come about? I went to the Amalfi Coast many years ago and became friendly with Ernesto Iaccarino, who is the chef at Don Alfonso, which is a Michelin-starred restaurant on the Amalfi Coast. And then when I took my parents back a year later, and my father said to me, I am so sick of Michelin food. If you don't get me a bowl of sloppy spaghetti, I might kill you. And I had to very sheepishly go to that Michelin-starred chef and say, oh, hey, so, my dad wants a pizza or something. And he, God love him, got it immediately. He said, let me take you to our favorite restaurant. And we drove downhill from Sant'Agata to Nerano, and it was the end of November. There was nobody there, and we had lunch. There was only a restaurant at the time. They hadn't created rooms yet, and I met the owner, Beppe De Simone, and we just totally became fast and furious friends. And I started going back. And over the years, his kids were in college when I first met him. And over the years, the kids have taken over. The restaurant is this phenomenal success. I'm sure everybody's like, we know, we've seen it on Instagram. J-Lo has her birthday there. But it's been really so beautiful to watch this third generation family restaurant suddenly run by the kids and the cousins. And they do such a beautiful job. And it's just this magical, warm, and wonderful place.
It is no surprise to me that you collect friends everywhere you go. I've seen it firsthand, and you really have this magnetism about you that just pulls people
that's
in.
nice. Oh, you're sweet.
True.
Thank you.
Are there many places that you return to, or is this one of the only that you continue to go back to?
I go back to Italy a lot. I'm overdue to go to Paris. I spent some time living in Paris when I was in college, and that was, I think after New York City, it's the city that I know the best, just in terms of I know where I'm going, walking around. Marrakesh, I like to go to Marrakesh a lot. Yeah. There are places I wish I could go back to more often, right? I wish I could spend more time in Sydney. I like Sydney. I've only been twice. Seoul, Korea, I'd be happy to go back there.
Yeah. Sadly, both are far from either New York or London. So it's not like one makes it easier than the other. So,
I know. It's easier to go to Rome. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, if we look at, everything that you've seen change and evolve in both media and hospitality, looking ahead, do you have any predictions for what the future of hospitality might hold?
Well, can I make it a wish list as opposed to predictions?
Sure. Sure.
So the prediction is something that I think is not really good. I keep seeing just a proliferation of more and more and more brands, right? And I just think it's a little too much. I think it ends up being confusing for the customer when these big multinational hotel chains keep launching brands, because I feel like it's just confusing to consumers. So what I wish would happen, I wish that things could get a little bit more personalized, right? And that doesn't mean more brands. It means just more personalized hotels, if we're speaking about that specifically. I'd like to see fewer chains and I'd like to see more places. That's, if I could really ask for anything, fewer chains and more places.
So last three questions for you that I ask everyone. First, I imagine you're going to have a laundry list to sort through, but what was the best hospitality experience you've ever had?
So I'll answer that by the things that I just can't stop thinking about. And so Sujan hotels in Rajasthan and Sujan, Jawai, I just keep coming back to the things that they did and the way that they created the guest experiences. I just remain blown away. And I remember so vividly, like every detail and every minute of the times that I spent there. So there's another Jawai, Sujan hotel farther into Rajasthan that I haven't been to, but these are just, if I think about what an incredible hospitality experience was, that's the one that I just keep coming back to.
And on the opposite, what was the worst?
We went to a hotel recently, and I don't want to name names, but I found it really upsetting that we came home after like this long day of museums, and the city was having this like special big citywide party, and we came back. They just wouldn't feed us at 5 after 11. The bar had closed at 11 o'clock, and it was 5 after, and they're like, no, we can't. And they're like, you can have room service. And I was like, I don't want to eat in my bed. And they were so stubbornly inflexible about something so stupid. It's like, we're guests in your hotel. We need a sandwich and we want to eat it on this sofa right here. And we were kind of like, it just makes no sense. It made absolutely no sense. So that was one of those things where it seemed like that could have been fixed so easily if somebody had just been a human being about the answer. And so that seemed like a senseless and really unnecessarily unpleasant experience. They served great food. We had an amazing lunch. We would go on to have a nice breakfast. But the fact that when we got home that night, they couldn't feed us left a really bad taste.
And final question for you. What does hospitality mean to you? And is there anyone, it can be a brand, a person, that you think has truly mastered it?
I think hospitality feels like you've had a warm hug. I think it just feels, which is probably a very Italian answer to give you, but it just feels like somebody's taking care of you in a really warm and thoughtful and not fake way. And that could be a bell person who is helping you with your bags, but tells you where to go to get a good cup of coffee around the corner. It can be a hotel GM who kind of pulls a rabbit out of a hat and arranges for you to visit a castle in the off hours. It can be, I was at Dromoland Castle and I spent a day with a hawk, like walking around with the hawk. And the woman who just took me around and taught me about the hawk took a little video in slow-mo of the hawk landing on my arm. I mean, so these are all just really sweet, personal moments where I just felt like somebody was being personal and warm.
Mm-hmm. And anyone that you think has mastered it specifically?
Luca Virgilio is the general manager of the Dorchester in London. And before that, he was a general manager of the Hotel Eden in Rome. I met him when I was an editor at Daily Candy, and I stayed at the Hotel Bellioni in London when we were launching Daily Candy London. When I saw him again, having started at Fathom, he remembered me as like this two-bit little not travel person from Daily Candy. And I was kind of like, what secret skill do you have that you know that? And it kind of goes back to what I was saying. Now, I haven't stayed at the Dorchester since he's done the renovation. I did stay at the Hotel Eden in Rome, which was glorious. But that level of, I mean, don't they say that super politicians have this power to just make you feel really seen in a really warm way? I have to say, he kind of did that. And I was like, amazed. So that's certainly something. I mean, Danny Meyer also does this, right? Very classically at his restaurants. Olivia Richely, who was, I met her when she was the GM at the Aman Gala in Galle. And you know, I made a joke about somebody pulls a rabbit out of a hat. She arranged for me to go to Taprobana Island in Sri Lanka. And that is one of the places I went to that I think of as purely magical, because it's this private home on an island. Like Isabella Blo's husband used to own this place, and my best friend had been there once on a photo shoot for French Vogue and told me about it. And for years I'd been dreaming of this place. And she was like, oh yeah, the car's coming. I've arranged for you to go and spend the day there. And I was like, what? And so thoughtful. I then saw her again when she was running Heckfield Place in the English countryside. And that same sense of like, I'm here to make magic moments happen. And that's a real gift.
Well, Pavia, speaking of magic, it has been magical to spend this time with you. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for spending time with me. And I can't wait to see you soon.
Likewise.
Take care. Thank you.
All right, everyone. It's time for today's sweet summary, where I break down the key insights and actionable takeaways from today's conversation. First of all, let's just take a moment to appreciate Pavia. Her warmth and compassion are so genuine. And on top of that, she's absolutely hysterical. She has a way of delivering punchlines that's uniquely her. What a gift. Throughout her career, she has really seen both media and hospitality evolve. From the golden days of expense accounts and corporate parties to today's digital democratization. We chatted about the upsides, like increased access and more diverse voices, and the downsides, hello, endless stream of dancing videos. And while we may have aired some grievances, I'm reminded that this ease of access is the very reason why this podcast exists today. Like most things in life, there's a balance of pros and cons. One of my favorite learnings from our conversation is the microscopic is universal. Pavia said, the more personal you are in telling a story, the more universal the appeal. If you try to create something for everyone, you end up connecting with no one. Her advice? Get laser focused on your point of view, what you say and how you want to say it, and your message will resonate on a broader scale. This idea ties into something deeper, our need to be heard, understood, and liked. It's easy to worry that being too specific might alienate people, but Pavia's insight illustrates that the opposite is true. When we lean into our unique perspectives, that's where the magic happens. And as she said, magic is the through line. And speaking of what you say and how you say it, she talked about how profoundly words matter. This should be no surprise coming from an editor, but I was intrigued by the certain banned words she had identified for herself. She's built a wildly successful business, yet doesn't like to be labeled an entrepreneur. She cringes at the overuse of luxury because it lacks specificity and can mean something entirely different to every single person. Her point is powerful. In today's digital age, we must be more conscious than ever about the words we choose and the messages we communicate. Finally, when I asked Pavia what hospitality meant to her, she said it felt like a warm hug, which is fitting since that's exactly what spending time with her feels like. And that concludes another episode of Sweet Success. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. We all know how important those 5-star reviews are. I also want to say a massive thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in. It means the absolute world to me. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have ideas for future guests, new topics to cover, or even just want to say hi, don't be shy. Message me through our website, sweetsuccesspodcast.com, or on social media at Sweet Success Podcast. That's sweet like hotel suite. Once again, I'm your host, Katie Cline, and I'm super excited to see you all next week.